Hi, Gene here. Welcome to today's thought. It was a Supreme Court Justice, Louis Brandeis, who described the states of our glorious union as laboratories of democracy. What he meant by that, obviously, was that all the states, any state could look at all the other states to see what was working and what was not working, and then adopt the policies of the states that were working, which briefly gets us to, Governor DeSantis of Florida, the successful state of Florida, was in the failed state of California recently, and he asked a very simple question, which was to all Americans, do we want America to be Florida or do we want America to be California? I'm not going to get into that today. That could be that's a subject for another day. My thought for today, though, is that getting into the laboratories of democracy theory, all of us can look at, California too, California can look in the mirror. The rest of us can look at Florida and California, and actually the state where I'm in right now, Tennessee and New York, and see what's working and what's not working, seeing which states are successful. For instance, Florida has a larger population now than New York, slightly larger population than New York, but their budget is about half of New York's. They have a surplus. New York, as I just said, their budget is double of Florida's, and they have a deficit. But the important difference I want to get right now is that California and New York, they have not just state income taxes, but very high state income taxes. I lived in New York for 40 years, so I experienced this for myself. And actually living in Tennessee, which has no state income tax, that actually almost pays for 2 trips to New York every year to visit friends and, if I want to go to the theater or whatever, to visit the museums. So the point is, the states we can see by looking at comparing California and New York to, say, Tennessee and Florida, or Texas, which also has no state income tax. We can see which states are more successful, and the more successful states are the ones that have no state income tax. So my question is, I guess it's obvious, but no one's ever said this, but if that's true for states, why would that not be true of countries? Look at countries around the world and see which countries have income taxes and which don't, and compare them. Unfortunately, as far as at least in the developing countries, there are no countries that I know of that have no income tax. France, England, Spain, you name the country, they all have an income tax. But my question is, looking at the states, maybe we should not have, people have proposed this, repeal the 16th Amendment and get rid of the income tax. Now, that's very important, to repeal the 16th Amendment. That was the founding fathers, this country was conceived not to have an income tax, and it specifically prohibited an income tax. And the 16th Amendment changed that and instituted the income tax. But the problem is, if you don't repeal that amendment, then you could end up repealing the income tax, but later having because you would replace it with a sales tax. So you would replace you could end up having, as you have in England, a sales tax and an income tax. And what England has actually is what they call a value-added tax, where they add tax onto each stage of production. So you sell the raw materials to the manufacturer, it's taxed. The manufacturer sells to the wholesaler, there's a tax. The wholesaler sells to the retailer, there's a tax. And so there's a tax to the individual who buys it. So you have all these layers of tax that are hidden, because the consumer only sees the very last tax when they buy the product or the service at retail. So we don't want to have that. So you would have to repeal the 16th Amendment. And I hope there will be a constitutional convention one of these days. That's another subject for another day that would do just that. But imagine if we had no income tax. Well, you can imagine by looking at as I said, the successful states, the states that have no income tax, they're very successful. They have Mike's state of Tennessee also has a surplus. And no state income tax. Now, people will object and say, well, you have to have a high sales tax, on which we do have here. There's a 10%, just about 10%, maybe a little over, sales tax. And food and medicine are taxed as opposed to, say, New York, where food and medicine were not taxed, but you have the income tax. So you have this higher sales tax. But let me correct that. I know food is taxed in Tennessee. I'm not sure about medicine, but I'm pretty sure that it is. The point is, though, but that's offset by having no income tax. And in New York, you have, if you live in New York City, you have a state income tax and you have a local city income tax, and you put those two together, and that's 10.25%. So that's the same income. That's the same tax as just the sales tax, the income tax, same as the sales tax in New York. But in Tennessee, we have no income. We have no state income tax. And you can see how this allows people to control. If you think taxes are too high, if the government tries to raise a sales tax, well, you can protest by just buying less. You buy less, and then the state gets less tax. So you see, which is actually in a way happening in New York right now, because people are fleeing the city or not wanting to come into work, and you have all these empty offices and landlords defaulting on their mortgage, their property taxes, so they're not being paid, and that's one reason why New York City has a deficit, and I believe New York State has one also. The point being, though, that if we had no income tax, can you imagine how people from all over the world talk about immigration? Every wealthy person who would really contribute just their income alone or just their money, how many of these people would want to immigrate to the United States? More than that, how many people would want to put their money in an American bank for us to be invested, for us to borrow, because the money would not be taxed, the income, the gain would not be taxed. And imagine that we had, because if you don't have an income tax, then you don't have to pry into people's bank accounts. So we could have, as the Swiss have, numbered accounts, secret accounts. If you had that, if you had a choice of putting your money putting your money in a numbered account in Switzerland or in the United States, you put it here, we would be flooded with investment and wealthy immigrants, and the economy would just skyrocket. And that's my thought for today. I welcome your comments. If you enjoy these comments, you might want to subscribe, share this. But thanks a lot for stopping by. I really appreciate it. And bye.